minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you, and a bit of an odd one this morning. In the second hour, I might actually nick Nick's idea. I might nick Nick's idea and return to that question of travelling to outer space. I once embarrassed myself live on the radio with the late, great Sir Patrick Moore when I sort of ribbed him a little bit about the pointlessness of space travel and the fact that it was a sort of excitement for superannuated schoolboys that had no particular purpose beyond the excitement of superannuated schoolboys. And he I believe the phrase is he tore me a new one in no uncertain terms. Thankfully, that was in the days before viral clips. Otherwise, it would still be tutoring around the internet to my shame and embarrassment. But and then, of course, it's Mystery Hour from 12. This might be the last Mystery Hour before the board game is in the shops, or it may be one more. Just waiting to see, because issues of supply chains are pertinent to getting a product from overseas into this country, and that is, oddly enough, precisely the territory which we will turn to first this morning. I kind of know that it's a really silly idea not to report stuff. It's a little bit kind of Stalinist, isn't it? Pravda. We will not be reporting on shortages in the Caucasus, because if we report on shortages in the Caucasus, then we will be confirming the existence of shortages in the Caucasus. A bit like Northern Ireland yesterday. I don't know if you were listening yesterday, but we covered the situation in Northern Ireland and the imminent attempt to build bridges, if you like. The European Union desperately trying to undo some of the self-inflicted damage that we have undertaken as a consequence of Brexit. And yet we spent 2 hours on the subject yesterday and didn't take a single call from Northern Ireland, and almost every call was from Northern Ireland, involving somebody who's unhappy with the current arrangements. But you read the coverage in the British media, particularly the Brexit supporting British media, and you wouldn't know that. It's actually incredible. You wouldn't know that in Northern Ireland, everybody's pretty happy with the way things are shaking down. But over here, there is I hate to say it, but people are unhappy with how well it's going, because the better it goes in Northern Ireland, the more obvious it becomes that not being in the trading arrangements that they remain in under European Union auspices is a silly idea. So what the European Union is trying to do today, and goodness me, listen, if they want to sell it in the British tabloids as a massive climb down or a humiliation for the European Commission, that's absolutely fine with me, and it's absolutely fine with Northern Ireland as well. I'll tell you that for nothing. They can sell it however they want, but what the European Commission is trying to do is sort of clear up as much of our mess as they can without compelling the UK government to admit that there is any mess at all. So everybody in Northern Ireland currently very happy with what is going on, but you don't report that in the British media, which is how the coverage can take the direction that it's currently taken. So it's not just me that has these thoughts. Can we rely... Pretty, come here a minute. Sajid, over here, Dom. We're having a bit of a tete-a-tete with all the key players in the current cabinet. Do you think we can rely upon all our client journalists to just completely ignore what's happening in Northern Ireland and continue to provide coverage that is utterly misrepresenting or ignoring reality? I think you'll find we can, Prime Minister. I think you'll let me just put in a few calls, see what everybody's up to. Will you be reporting on the reality of the situation in Northern Ireland? Absolutely not, boss. No way. If I did that, I might not be able to get you in my studio to give you a little bit of a tickle this time next week. We will not be reporting on any of that. I certainly won't be doing, because you won't back my campaign in my newspaper to be rude to doctors if I were to actually report upon reality. So it's not just me that has these thoughts. The idea that you ignore the news for short-term self-serving political gain is already established in the current modus operandi. So why not ignore the news for long-term population gain? What would have happened, a genuine question, what would have happened if nobody had told you last month that BP had been compelled to close, 24 petrol stations out of hundreds? What would have happened if nobody had told you that about 10% of the tanker fleet was up on bricks because they didn't have the drivers? What would have happened? Yeah, exactly. So it's 50% mischief, not even mischief, I don't know quite what the word is. 50% kind of irresponsibility, 50% sincere inquiry this morning. What would have happened? That's the sincere inquiry. And, of course, the irresponsibility kicks in when... What would have happened if journalists stopped doing journalism? It's a funny one, isn't it? I thought it yesterday with the Insulate Britain scenes, which are becoming increasingly ridiculous stroke dangerous. You know, someone is going to get hurt. And again, some corners of the media seem to be almost actively encouraging a form of vigilantism that would see some poor retired verger or a vicar who is currently seeking to stop traffic by sitting down in the middle of the road get lamped by an angry white van man, or indeed grey or blue or purple van man. I don't want to discriminate. So that kind of imagery and that growing sense of fear made me wonder what would happen if we didn't report it. If there were no cameras there, what would happen? How many people are directly affected by a few retired accountants and teachers and vicars sitting in the middle of the road on one small part of our national road structure? What would happen? Exactly. A relatively small number of people would be incredibly inconvenienced and very angry. But why on earth would you be angry if you were listening to it or watching it in Bury when it was happening on the M25, or you were watching it in Birmingham or Dundee or Edinburgh or Belfast? I could go on. Or Doncaster or, I don't know, Stoke-on-Trent or Tamworth in Arden or Chorlton-cum-Hardy. Why would it? You wouldn't even get angry about it, would you? Unless I came along and went, get furious here with something that's happening miles away from you and won't affect you in any way, shape or form. So what would happen? If Insulate Britain, if we stopped reporting it, would they go away? I might do that on tomorrow's programme. It's quite a good question, actually. Keith, write that down. 10 after 10 is the time. Because this is the front page of my favourite newspaper. The I newspaper, which just has a lovely mix of short, punchy fact delivery and some really interesting longer reads, and quite an array of columnists. One or two of them, if I was in charge, would be handed their sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap because they detached themselves from reality some time ago, but that's why I'm not in charge. If you're going to have an honest newspaper, then you have to reflect the fact that many members of the British media detached themselves from reality some time ago. But here is the front page of the I newspaper. Shops facing goods delays for Christmas. Oh my God, I said it. I've said it out loud now. So what happens now? Congestion at Felixstowe, which is Britain's biggest port, poses supply threat to leading high street names including Tesco, Primark, John Lewis, Marks & Spencer and Asda. HGV driver shortage and lack of warehouse space could mean electrical items and clothing are badly affected during the busiest shopping period of the year. Ministers were warned about dangers of port backlog in December of last year. I told you about this, I think. Was it in December of last year? Do you know? I think it was. I told you some friends of mine in construction get their gear delivered. They sort of build bespoke gazebos and stuff like that, and they get the gear delivered from China. It comes over from China in containers. And at the beginning of this year, end of last year, the journey of the containers began to change. It was much more difficult to sort of drop off some containers in Rotterdam and then hop over and drop off the rest in the UK. So they were facing 8 to 12 week delays on stuff that they needed to get the gear in place by Christmas. Yeah, we did actually warn about this last December. That's incredible, isn't it? It wasn't our warnings that the government should have heeded. It was warnings from the sector, from the industry. So ministers were warned about this in December of last year. They haven't done much. And, of course, alongside that, on the front page of the I newspaper, the continuing collapse of energy firms will also see many customers facing that steep, well, all customers, I guess, ultimately, but just a question of when, not if, facing a steep rise in bills. So I don't know what is going on. It's always worth asking, isn't it? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I do know this. I'm just actually going to get my phone because it's a text from a contact of mine who I knew would be across this. And you won't believe, I mean, you might because you trust me and you know that my contacts are impeccable, which is why we've predicted almost everything that's happened in the last 5 years. But this is quite nuts, right? I don't know what line of work you're in, but this is a container from China that a pal of mine uses quite regularly, a container supply from China. Last year, you were paying about $3,000 per container, right? £3,000 per container last year. Guess what you're paying now? Right now. Nope, higher. I'm going to go all Bruce Forsyth on you if things carry on like this. Go on, have another guess. Nope, higher. Last chance, third time lucky. £3,000 this time last year. Today, right now, you want to sign up for the same thing? Guess how much? Go on. No, mate, £27,000. £27,000. It's a 9-fold increase for only slow coaches in the class today. That's 3 times 9 equals 27. Unless you're a Brexiter, in which case it equals 11-4. Your product is coming in, but it's... And of course, the cost of the product in the container is still going to dwarf the cost of transport. It's still worth your while, but it takes a bite out of your margins. So that's going on. 0345 606 0973. I don't think this small radio entertainment is going to be responsible for panic buying. I think sometimes we forget that we're a very tight-knit community here at LBC, particularly on the Great British Radio Show. But and we did take calls, of course, in the early days of the petrol crisis, where people said, well, I went out and filled up my tank yesterday because I heard on LBC that there were shortages. And we take some responsibility for that. But I don't think that having a conversation about how worried we should be and taking calls from people in a position to actually provide some sort of first-hand insight and evidence is necessarily irresponsible. In fact, I am confident that it is not irresponsible, OK? I don't think that the journalism is false or badly intentioned. I think that the congestion at Felixstowe is a matter of evidence of your eyes and ears, not a matter of opinion. And I think we will all be concerned on some level to see names like Tesco, Primark, John Lewis, Marks and Spencer and Asda on this front page. But how do we calibrate the quantity and the quality of our response? 0345 606 0973. How concerned should we be? It's a slightly vague question. Let's try and be a little bit more focused on that one. How concerned are you about potential shortages of goods at Christmas? I don't think people are going to go out and start panic buying in the sort of, what are we now, the last week of October pretty much? I beg your pardon, the beginning of the third week of October. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you're going to do it. I do, however, wonder what is going on in your world. What is going to happen? I don't think the B word obviously isn't responsible for all of these problems, and possibly on this occasion it's not responsible for any of them. Could it be responsible for a lack of work? I suppose if you've got a shortage of drivers, then you back up in the warehouses, right? And that's why you have a lack of warehouse space. So yeah, the labour shortage is going to be an exacerbating factor. We would have a shortage of lorry drivers even if we hadn't done the B word. It just wouldn't be as bad. It makes almost all problems worse and solves nothing. That's essentially going to be the epitaph eventually, but we're not ready to write that epitaph yet. The warning today is that shops are facing goods delays for Christmas, and I want to know what you know. 0345 6060 973. How worried are you, given what you do, and how? And actually, yes, I do. I don't want you to be excluded from the conversation if you don't have any insights. Talk to me briefly about. Yeah, go on then. Give me a call and tell me. Do you think there is any case at all for not reporting this stuff, not warning you? I always think my job is to give you the knowledge you need to make informed decisions. But if I was in charge, I probably wouldn't have told you about the petrol stations closing, actually, because, as we said on the first morning that we covered it, this is going to have precisely the opposite effect that's intended. It was the front page of the Times saying Downing Street says do not panic buy petrol. I sat here and I said to you, that's going to achieve the polar opposite of what they have called for, the polar opposite. So there's no front page yet saying do not panic buy from Tesco, Primark, John Lewis, Marks and Spencer's, Asda and everywhere else. And it's probably too early. No one's going to go out and buy a turkey today, are they? I don't know. Maybe you are. That could be another phone in. But is there ever any argument at all for managing the news? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. 10:17 is the time. And if you are already cutting your cloth because of potential Christmas shortages, give me a call and we can decide whether you're being clever or silly. Although I'd be far too polite to call you silly until after you've hung up. 21 minutes after 10 is the time, and I owe you a minor apology. I haven't scanned the Daily Mail today for once. Normally I start my day with the Daily Mail for various reasons. And they have actually got this on page 12. Start buying your Christmas presents now. and now is underlined. So the question about whether or not it is helpful, the Daily Mail, I hope this doesn't come as a shock to anybody, it wields rather more weight and power with the British public than the Great British Radio currently manages to achieve. So there it is. There is the call from the most influential newspaper in the country. Go out now. Families have been warned to start shopping for Christmas now, amid fears that supplies of toys, electrical goods and other products will be disrupted by logjams at UK ports. What do you make of it all, particularly if you are in this sector? Simon is in Dublin. You're a day late, Simon. Yesterday's show was all about matters Irish. I don't know what's prompted you to ring in today. Tell me.
I look after a number of large companies that import most of their products into the UK from China. And basically, unless it's on the sea now or it's already in, you're not going to see it arriving into the UK before the end of the year.
And so, crikey, so I don't know how big a deal that is because I don't know what the normal situation would be. Well,
it's usually about 6 weeks, 7 weeks from China into Ireland, into the UK.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing now as well is that the Chinese government are closing down some of the electrical producing factories because they're running out of coal. Coal is becoming very expensive.
Right.
So they're going to cut down to a 2 or 3 day week as well from manufacturing.
So we've got problems with manufacturing and longer transport times and log jams at the UK ports.
And it's been the same like that all year in the UK.
Why, Simon? Well, I mean, I know that's a complicated question that doesn't admit a really simple answer, but the longer something goes on, the more perhaps one would expect political leadership to address the problems and possibly even begin to solve, alleviate, if not solve them.
Truckers. There's not enough truckers in the UK. Hasn't been so for years. They've made it worse by kicking them out for Brexit. Everyone's been going onto the rail, and the rail service out of the UK ports is just stretched beyond belief. You can't. We've got shipments coming in that are sitting on port for a month that we can't get onto the rail. We can't get a trucker. It's just crazy over there.
And that. We've. I think the 27 applicants were there for these temporary visas and temporary licences, and
that's made a huge difference.
We need roughly 5,000. Would that, whether or not people want to come or not, only time will tell. But if I could arrange for 5,000 people with the right accreditation and licences to turn up today, would we be able to solve the problem by Christmas?
You're not, unless it's here now or it's already on the sea. You're not going to get it in the shops before Christmas now. So no chance.
And this will be more goods than food, won't it, at this point in proceedings? We're talking about, obviously with China, anything that is manufactured in China is a problem.
Yeah.
And final question, why is Maersk, M-A-E-R-S-K, diverting some supersized vessels away from Felixstowe? And what will that mean? Because that isn't going to alleviate problems, is it? That's going to make a bad situation worse.
They've all been doing it. All the big shipping lines have been doing it for most of the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They've been taking them into European ports because they can offload their big ships. They do not want them sitting outside UK ports because they've been taking longer to offload because the ports have got nowhere to put the containers, and therefore they until they got them moved off the port, there's nowhere to put them. So they've been taking longer to offload them. So they take their reaction, take the big ships to the European ports, offload them, use smaller feeder vessels into the main UK ports. They're quicker to offload and they can turn them around.
Right, and
so that takes the problem away from the container lines.
And now the pendulum swings back. I don't know how often you listen to the programme. And
every day.
Right, so would I be doing my listeners a service then by telling them to go out and buy toys in particular, toys and electronic goods right now if they were hoping to have them under the tree on Christmas Day?
I've still got family in the UK.
Yeah.
I've got customers in the UK. I've been saying to them, if you haven't bought it now, or at least done it by the end of this month, forget it, because if it's not in shops now, it's not coming in.
Well. 26 minutes after 10 is the time. I listen, Simon rings the programme, knows what he's talking about, neck deep in the sector. I hope he's not correct. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about to me, but the way this programme works, I don't have a lie detector test. If you think you are qualified to contradict what he's said, specifically, I think because it's Christmas, we're going to look at toys and electronic goods. I would be doing you a disservice. To answer the other question that I asked at the top of the programme, would it be better? It's not like petrol, is it? Because if you want that Paw Patrol's toy under your tree on Christmas morning, the advice that's coming from almost everybody qualified seems to be get it as soon as you humanly can. Gary Grant of the toy giant The Entertainer said that Barbie dolls and Paw Patrol toys are prime candidates for being short in the Christmas season. It's October the 14th. And you're being told to go out and buy your Christmas presents already. And there are two problems with that. Number one, they're going to run out. And number two, the kids are going to find them. If, you know, the ones you get off mum and dad, obviously Santa will be fine. But the ones you get off mum and dad could be hidden somewhere in the house and possibly... Or was it just me that used to do that? Why are you looking at me like that? I used to spend all of December. I'd start in about November. Just a little peek, little peel back. 27 minutes after 10 is the time. Gary's in Reading. Gary, what can you tell us?
Hi. Just wanted to let you know what the experience is at the moment in the food retail market. So I'm the store manager for a food retailer, and what we're actually seeing is slightly contradictory to the toy market, and we're starting to see a slight improvement in our supply chain.
Good.
So I think just coming back to your point earlier about what part of the media plays in this, and just making sure that they're producing all the objective facts to stop the panic buying. I think that at the moment the food supply seems to be in a better place than it certainly has been over the last 6 months.
Partly the reason will be that the people who were driving school buses and bin lorries have been tempted into driving lorries that are delivering food to the supermarkets. In my line, I'm not going to press you to tell me which one you work for, but I'm looking at one now that has got its Christmas food and the giant Toblerones and the capine, and it's got stock up early written across the top of the shelf. So what are they doing? Just trying to fill their boots while they can? Or I mean, it's not advice,
I think so. Yeah, I think there's a bit where they're just trying to probably smooth the demand out as well. So actually, if people can buy their ambient stuff now, then it saves them having to worry about it, a bit closer to Christmas. And then also just trying to...
Have you bought your turkey yet, Gary? Have you bought your turkey yet? Why are you laughing?
No,
some people have.
I don't feel that from what we're currently seeing at the moment, I don't feel that there's a need to panic buy in the food market. And sometimes some of the issues we see within the shelves that the media can plaster on it in their papers and on their social media pages might not actually be related to supply. So a good example of that was 3 weeks ago we had customers panic buying toilet rolls because the toilet roll area looked light again. But that's because of an IT issue, not because of a supply chain issue.
There is a weird mood. There's a weird mood abroad, isn't there, though? I mean, we saw it with the petrol problems, which were fairly crazy, but you remind us, of course, at the beginning of the lockdown, everyone was out buying bog roll like it was going out of fashion. It doesn't take much. It's why I'm glad you're on. So you don't need to worry about your Christmas puddings and your dates, your medjool dates, and all of your nuts and crackers.
We've got plenty of mince pies as well.
There you go. Don't tell Steve Allen.
I think they're to be eaten now rather than at Christmas time.
Everyone likes a mince pie. You don't have to wait till Christmas.
If everyone behaves in a relatively normal and sensible way, you will still get your Christmas dinner, and I think that's the best message that needs to get out there.
Well, I hope you're right, and we'll keep an eye on things and absolutely enforce that idea that the panic buying now would cause problems that wouldn't otherwise have occurred, as we saw with the petrol stuff. But here is the scary bit. People from within the British Toy and Hobby Association said we expect continued disruption to delivery schedules over the coming months. There are plenty of toys to choose from presently, but in common with other sectors advised, buying early, especially if buying for a Christmas or birthday present, is prudent. That's the British Toy and Hobby Association. Meanwhile, Oliver Dowden says there's nothing to worry about. Don't worry, everybody. Don't worry about what the people running toy shops or the head of the British Toy and Hobby Association says, because Oliver Dowden says, I'm confident people will be able to get their toys for Christmas. What are you going to do? And what advice would you give? 0345 60 973. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 10:34 is the time. Jonathan, being rather serious, it's a very good point, this. He says, James, I've got a question for you. Always makes me worry slightly, that, at the beginning of a text. If press and media reporting of fuel and or food shortages creates panic buying from the public, what does reporting of refugees arriving in the country create? It appears to me that it suits the government to call out the former as irresponsible whilst enjoying the fallout from the latter. It's a very good point, actually. But, two wrongs don't make a right. Should we be Should I be, for example, even mentioning that the Daily Mail today carries a page 12 big headline saying start buying your Christmas presents now? And don't blame the media. I think I may have slightly misdirected you on that, because the British Toy and Hobby Association is warning about disruption to delivery schedules. What usually takes 6 weeks is now taking 12. So if it's not here already, it won't be here by Christmas. And various bigwigs from the toy industry are warning about shortages in the Christmas season. I don't know what it's like. Mine are old enough now for this not to be pertinent. And I don't know. You're probably going to correct me if you remember me saying stuff on the show a few years ago. I don't think we ever had I always think of Tracy Island. Do you remember Tracy Island, the Thunderbirds thing that was one Christmas? It was just everybody wanted it, apparently. It was so popular that they ended up trying to do a homemade version on Blue Peter, which always makes my skin crawl. Could you imagine waking up on Christmas morning and finding that you've got a homemade Tracy Island? Or anything homemade, to be honest with you. Unless it's made by a small child and you have to pretend it's just what you've always wanted, then don't at me on this. If you make your own jam and stuff, that's slightly different. But a homemade toy... So, do you know what I mean? That one year, there's something that everybody wants to have, like Transformers, robots in disguise. Well, I don't know. I don't know if there is that kind of thing at the moment. The bloke who runs The Entertainer, which is a great toy store, is talking about Barbie dolls. Well, that's hardly seasonal, is it, or fashionable? And Paw Patrol toys, which is a sort of crime-fighting canines, isn't it, or emergency service canines. So I don't know, but if it's really specific, if your little treasure really, really wants something very specific, then I think it would be remiss of me not to give you a heads up on what the toy industry is saying. The problem then becomes, well, of course they're saying that, but you don't sell more via panic buying, you just sell it quicker. So I don't know that there is a cynical argument here for saying, well, I don't believe them, they're just saying that to get us all to go out and buy stuff, because you'd have bought it anyway. Anyway. Daniel's in Maida Vale. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Hey, James.
Hey, Dan.
I'd like to say that it's not... I actually own a toy website.
Cool.
We sell... well, we used to sell travel toys for kids, but obviously with travel and COVID, it sort of slowed it down a little bit.
Yes,
but we sell mainly, special kits to entertain kids. And they're made up of thousands of different toys.
Yes.
We do pre-filled stocking fillers and fidget toys, all sorts of things. And categorically, from the horse's mouth, because I buy and sell toys all the time, there is a major delay.
Right.
We've had things stuck on the ocean for 2 months, probably.
Why are they stuck on the ocean because they can't get into the port? Is that what's happening?
Yes, well, yeah, I mean, so there's that, but we're not alone here.
No.
I mean, in America, it's terrible as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's containers sat. There's a website, I can't remember what it's called, but you can look and see where all the containers are stuck out on sea.
Oh, okay.
And there's thousands of them just stuck there.
And
so
that's because that's the bottleneck is caused by lorry drivers, is it? Wherever we are.
No, I don't even think.
Well,
it's
what
that.
is it
I think
then?
It goes all the way back to China. There's problems there with energy. They've got energy problems.
once the ship is on the ocean and it can't dock, that must be.
Oh, well then yes, I'm sure it's to do with staffing and various.
They can't
things.
unload it. They can't then transport it, and that would also explain the thing that briefly confused me at the beginning of the show this morning was a reduction in warehouse capacity, but that's what a bottleneck is, isn't it?
It makes everything more expensive as well. So and also for a small business like mine, I own a company called keepemquiet.com. I'm going to plug it, but there you go.
I'd rather you'd waited for the invitation, but you waited just about long enough, so I'll let you off. But anybody else thinking of pulling that one, I'll put you straight through to the advertising department. Carry on, Daniel.
Can I just make a point, though?
Yes, of course you can.
As a small business, like I'm not the Entertainer, I'm not one of these very big companies, but we do pretty well. But the problem is that it's cash flow intensive because of you're panicking or you're pre-planning stock getting here. You've actually got to have a sort of look at it through a crystal ball almost and say, well, okay, if there is going to be delays, I've got to buy it all now.
Yeah.
Because
it's too late now, is it already?
No, well, people are buying now. People are buying Christmas stuff. They've been buying.
No, but for you can't put an order in now in the hope of getting it into customers' hands by Christmas.
Well, if you ship it in via air freight, probably you could, but it's hugely expensive, and it means that all the prices per unit go up and everything goes up. Like I said, the pre-filled Christmas stockings that we sell, for instance, there's so many little things that go in these things that there's a fixed price that they really kind of have to be.
And there comes a point where it's not worth your while
Well, I mean, people are buying them quite,
Sure.
in big volumes now. Nicer, and it's early, and they're buying them, but it still creates cash flow problems, and it creates knock-on effects of lots of different things. My warehouse are probably busier at certain points, and then they can't manage it properly. There's lots of things that go into it, and it's problematic, and it's not just...
What does the light at the end of the tunnel look like, then? Because the petrol thing was almost Kafkaesque, wasn't it, the way that it unfolded? And it's rather embarrassingly, I don't know now whether or not that problem is completely solved. I haven't seen any massive queues at petrol stations near me, but I'm coming in on the train at the moment, not on the road. So... what does an alleviation look like? Because you're describing something that's been in place for months and will probably stay in place for many more months to come.
Well, I think this is the reality now. I mean, there's going to be, we can't just kind of float through COVID like a strange time where 18 months we weren't really going anywhere or doing anything, and then expect everything just to get back to normal sort of 2-3 months afterwards. I don't think, travel's just started to open up now. Thankfully, because we were known mainly for travel, so we were affected quite drastically for that. But, that's now starting to open up, so people are starting to book flights. But not everything can just go back to the sort of rush.
No, but this is the bit I don't get. Everything you say makes sense to me, but I would have thought that the consequence of the last 18 months would have meant that you had loads of stuff backed up.
No, well, lockdown was very busy for toys, stationery.
So you personally were doing quite good business once you slightly recalibrated away from travel towards stuck at home.
Yeah, you had to.
Yeah,
you innovate or die. You have to change. So you have to.
So a sector that really got hit hard and the business really suffered would perhaps, unless it was perishable goods, they might actually have stock in place. And although they would struggle with the driver issue, they wouldn't struggle with the supply issue because they had a backlog of stock that they could get rid of at a rate because they hadn't got rid of it during lockdown. But any business that has carried on ticking over during lockdown, or even perhaps done better than usual, which is the case for a lot of retailers, they've got double problems because they've got no stock backed up, they've got no stock in storage, as it were, warehoused, and there's huge problems with new stuff coming in.
Well, there's lots of problems with new stuff coming in, price rises that eventually get past the consumer because you can't. It's not. The margins are tight on lots of different toys and things like that. So you can't just sort of sell them at what they were selling in 2019, for instance.
No,
it's not.
No, you're right, of course, and I'm being a bit daft on that. I mean, there will be some sort of timeless products, but otherwise, everything from toys to trainers is linked to fashion. I'm going to read you out a text from a very reliable listener who I know well. But I'm going to get the bleep ready. I'm going to bleep out a word on this one. Was that going to take too long? It's not a rude word, but I just don't think, because I love the punchline at the end of it. Have we got a bleep ready, or is that? Give me a shout when we've got a bleep ready. Thank you, Daniel. Take care. Steve's in Epping. Steve, what do you reckon?
Yeah.
Hello, Steve.
I think we're always reporting quite a lot behind the times. So what's going on now was pretty predictable and known about a few months ago.
I was on it personally last December, Steve, to be honest with you, but it was in a very specific area of import from China that somebody I know quite well was suffering from. But the government was apparently warned last December that this was on the cards. But you're right, it's only when it hits us in the shelves that we're going to start getting on it.
There's this massive bomb has gone off of COVID, and the ripples are still happening, and they're happening quite profoundly. So lots of businesses, as you said earlier, did well, and then they ran out of stock and couldn't restock.
Yes.
And my business is similar to that in that we just ran out and then we couldn't get any more. So you just have got nothing to serve your customers with. And then all the stock you have been ordering, the lead times go up from 3 months to 6 months. Some of my suppliers now are quoting 9 months from China.
9 months? So what would it have been 2 years ago?
10 weeks.
Flipping heck, that's not good, is
it? And that's again, it's a ripple effect that they can't get the supplies that they need. The metal prices have doubled in price, and now they've gone down to they're literally working 2 or 3 days a week because they've shut down the electricity supply in the two major regions of You're
the second caller to mention that. The second caller.
So in Guangdong, which is in the south, and an area in the north called Jiangsu, which is their number 1, number 2 of their GDP supplying areas.
Yeah.
If you can't prove as a factory that you are grade A in terms of eco, so you need to have your own solar panels, you need to not produce too much waste,
sure.
You need to then they're restricting your electricity, they're rationing your electricity. So lots of the factories are closing down.
I suppose. I mean, it's no comfort to you, but the reliance upon that supply chain is something that needs to be addressed for both, I suppose, commercial and environmental reasons. It just probably is not ideal to be addressing it in quite such a speedy, violent fashion.
Well, they tend not to discuss it with the people. They just say, right, we're doing this, and the next day it happens.
But I mean, I'm thinking about our reliance. I mean, there is something fundamentally daft about how much stuff, and I know it's all to do with labour costs and working practices, but the idea that it is so much cheaper for you to bring in something that's been put together in China, despite the length of the journey and the cost of the transit.
The balance is going to shift.
Yeah.
The balance is going to shift, and a lot of it, if you can kind of do a calculation in your head between the value of an item and the actual bulk of an item.
Yeah.
So anybody that's been bringing in, for example, patio furniture, which are big, bulky items, but they're quite lightweight, and they don't necessarily cost a lot of money, they've got trouble because, a container might have 160 pieces in it, and suddenly it's costing them £16,000. It's costing them over £100 extra per unit. To bring it into the country.
So it's the amount of space it takes up. Because you pay per container regardless of how much it weighs, pretty much,
Exactly. So if you've got a high-value item that's quite small, then on a pro rata basis, the actual rising cost isn't that great.
No, I understand. You're a very good communicator. Do you want to mention what you do? You don't have to. It's up to you.
We manufacture and sell patio heaters.
Okay. You want to name the company? You can if you want, seeing as you were polite enough not to smuggle it in uninvited.
I did notice that before. It's Heat Outdoors, heat-outdoors.co.uk.
I bet you had a good lockdown, didn't you? Albeit troubles getting stuff in. We bought a patio heater. We bought a kind of wall-mounted one during lockdown because we were sitting outside so much.
Well, exactly. Hopefully it was one of mine.
Well, I'll check and I'll let you know tomorrow. Thank you, Steve. 10:47 is the time. 10 minutes to 11. Everyone's a critic. This from Lino. Oh, come on. Blue Peter showed the kids how to make their own Tracy Island. It wasn't for frantic parents who waited until their kids had gone to bed before hitting play on their VHS machines and starting to glue toilet rolls together. He raises a valid point. I don't imagine many people did find a homemade Tracy Island under their Christmas trees on Christmas morning, now that you come to mention it. But speaking of humble gifts, this from Gumbo has made me check my privilege, I think is the phrase that we use. It's also sort of quite poignant. It says, I was once given 2 Madonna cassettes and a Duran Duran for Christmas. They were recorded from the neighbour by my mother, and I was still made up. Oh, mate, seriously? Oh, if I had a time machine, oh, that's so cute. I remember when I cleaned the neighbour's car for money. I mean, it wasn't like weird. And I noticed that he had all the tapes. You remember when you were a kid, you had no tapes? Tapes were really expensive. For my birthday one year, Dad said I could have 2 tapes. And I chose the ones that had the most songs on. So I ended up, I don't think I even knew Ultravox at the time. I might have been aware of one song, Vienna. I bought Ultravox the collection because it had loads of songs on it. And I bought Give My Regards to Broad Street by Paul McCartney. Not his finest work, but it had more songs on it than anything else in the charts at the time. So I bought 2 out, and I still love both albums. The collection is the greatest hits, but I love Ultravox. And the guy who lived next door, lovely bloke, I was doing his car for, valeting and polishing his car in the school holidays for pocket money. And in his tape collection, he had all of them. He had all the big 80s bangers from Eurythmics, Dire Straits, all of that. And he let me borrow his tape box with about 20 tapes in it. And I spent the money I got from polishing and cleaning his car on blank D90s, remember? And on the twin tape, on your Matsui, which everyone thought was like a funky Japanese brand, but it was just the name that Currys stuck on their homegrown gear for kids whose parents wouldn't buy them, fancy stuff. Own brand Currys, twin tape machine. And I did all of them. I had a lot at one point. So I get that, Gumbo, but I would have been a little hacked off if that had been wrapped up on Christmas morning, but I guess it's relative. Shows how lucky I was. 10:53 is the time. And speaking of looking for Christmas presents, Peter's been in touch. I have no idea whether or not this is in good faith or whether he's yanking my chain. He goes, looking for Christmas presents as a youngster gave me really useful skills for when I joined the police and started executing search warrants. Well, you live and learn. And just to clarify again for any younger listeners, obviously we're talking today about the presents that Mummy and Daddy get you, or Mummy or Daddy or Grandma or Auntie Doris or Uncle Keith. We're not talking about the stuff that Father Christmas brings, which will all be fine. I mean, obviously, because there's no shortage of elves and they don't need freedom of movement in order to undertake that. Well, the sled, I'll leave that now. 10:53 is the time. And we've got the beeps ready, because this is quite good. From one of my very reliable sources, and another one, actually. The friend who told me about the shortages at the ports last year is listening today, which is good to know, because I often think people I know in real life are pretending when they tell me that they listen to the show, and bump into them at a drinks. What is it you do again? Oh, I'm on the radio. Oh, yeah, of course, I listen every day. So I get the beep ready, because I don't want to embarrass anybody. Dave, who works here, his missus works at in the supply chain. She has urged me to buy toys for the kids now because we'll definitely run out well before Christmas. But can you let me buy them before you read this out? Thanks. Well, I've done the best of both worlds. I've read it out and I haven't dropped you in it. So, a warning at least. And my other friend who told me that they were not getting their gear last Christmas because of the delays and because of ships being redirected to Rotterdam, which is in today's newspapers almost a year to the day later. She's been in touch. So the situation with shipping has been dire for well over a year now. It's been exacerbated by Brexit and the shortage of HGV drivers, but it seems the media are only interested when Christmas is involved. It's not just Christmas and toys that make this important, it's everyday goods and staples that are getting stuck too. Prices will soar as the cost of shipping and storage climbs, which historically means inflation will go up, and that means that any increases in wages, which are, let's be honest, fairly unlikely unless you're in a really badly hit sector, will not be real-time increases at all. Ian's in Ashford. Ian, what can you tell us?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. Ho, ho, ho.
Thanks for keeping holding everyone to account over the last couple of years.
Yeah, fat lot of good it's done us.
Yes. You're speaking to Mr. Smug here. My Christmas shopping for my kids is all but done. I'm literally waiting on 2 more items.
Wow. One
should be arriving today, and it's precisely because of thinking ahead and thinking about shortages. And
why were you ahead of the curve? Why were you a bit ahead of the curve on this? Because I mean, I don't have young children, so I don't think the kids want anything particularly at the moment that's going to be affected by this. That may well come back to haunt me. But why were you ahead of the curve?
Well, first of all, I've got 4 young kids,
right.
11 and under,
there
all
you go.
boys.
Yeah.
And not only is it Christmas that I need to worry about, 3 of the 4 boys will have birthdays starting tomorrow, running right up to Christmas, with one of them being on the 22nd December.
Gosh.
So I have to save all through the year, and I buy the presents as I need to. But when it comes to Christmas, it's normally around the end of November. But having watched people queuing up, panic buying petrol and toilet rolls in recent times, as soon as and I work for a manufacturer of building materials. And I'm quite aware of the container issue.
Yeah.
So just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I just thought, you know what, I need to start doing this now, and I'm pretty much done.
And this isn't like the petrol stuff, is it? Because the petrol crisis was caused by people worrying about what other people were doing. These shortages are finite. This is going to run out, and so
absolutely,
come early, come all. Otherwise, you'll be packaging up some sort of dodgy Poundland version of whatever it is the kids want this Christmas and pretending it's the real McCoy.
Other pound shops are available.
Well, this is true. But you can get away with that when they're very young. What age would you say they become brand conscious? Because you remember, I mean, with me it was sports gear. I never got the Slazenger and the Dunlop gear. I always got the slightly not like the ones that came free with a tin of Castrol GTX. That kind. Yeah, exactly that. The ones from Woolworths that had a sort of like Lidl and Aldi do with food now. It looks like. So, what age do your boys become conscious of brands?
They're just starting to become brand aware now. I mean, my eldest has just started grammar school, secondary school.
Right. So you've got to have the right gear, haven't you?
Yeah. So there's going to be a bit of a change in him. I think this is probably the last year where toys matter more than other things.
Yeah, got you.
So next year might be slightly different. And then I've got a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Cool.
And they're all boys. So yeah. But I guess my real point was you can't really panic buy presents and toys, because it's not like toilet rolls where you're running out and buying 200 at a time per person.
Oh, I see what you mean. That's another good point, actually. So, because it is going to be... You're only going to buy the same amount on the day of the transaction that you would have bought a month later or 2 months later. You're not going to... Yeah, that's a really important point. I can't believe it's taken us an hour to get there. So all of these comparisons... Oh, it's just like the toilet roll. Of course it's not like... Who's going to go out and buy 500 Paw Patrols just to be sure that you've got one on Christmas morning? Honestly, I can't believe they pay me to present this rubbish some mornings. Thank God Ian was there. Thank God someone was paying attention. Keith, wake up. Honestly, we're embarrassing ourselves on the programme this morning.